For just a moment, genuine fear flickered across Catherine's face. Then her mask slammed back into place. "I don't know what lies you've been feeding my husband," she said icily. "But this farce ends now. Ava, return to your room immediately. Or what?" Ava surprised herself with the steadiness of her voice. "You'll lock me in the cellar? Strike me again? Starve me for days?" She took a step forward. "Go ahead, Catherine. Do it in front of witnesses this time. I dare you." The silence that followed was electric. Catherine's face went through a remarkable transformation, rage to calculation, to something almost like admiration. "You've grown a spine," she said softly. "How unexpected." "People evolve when they're no longer living in fear," Ava replied. "Fear?" Catherine's laugh was sharp. "Oh, darling, you should still be afraid. Because tomorrow night, when you inevitably humiliate yourself in front of society, when everyone sees the disturbed, unstable girl you've become," she smiled coldly, "there won't be any coming back from that." "We'll see," Alexander said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have preparations to attend to." Catherine's eyes narrowed dangerously. For a moment, Ava thought she might actually strike her right there. But instead, the Duchess simply smiled. A terrible, knowing smile. "Enjoy your little rebellion while it lasts," she said sweetly. "By this time tomorrow, it will all be over." She swept past them up the stairs, her silk skirts rustling like a serpent's scales. When she was gone, Ava released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking. "You did well," Sebastian said quietly, his hand briefly touching her lower back in support. "That was incredibly brave." "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified." "Bravery and terror often coexist," Alexander said. "The trick is not letting fear control you." He looked at both of them. "Catherine will spend tonight fortifying her position. We should do the same. Sebastian, continue with the evidence distribution. I'll speak with the servants and make sure everyone knows their roles for tomorrow." "And me?" Ava asked. Alexander's expression softened. "You rest. Tomorrow will be the longest night of your life. You'll need your strength." But rest proved impossible. That evening, after a formal dinner where Catherine refused to speak or even look at her, Ava found herself too restless to sleep. She wandered to the library, the same room where Alexander had witnessed Catherine's cruelty just the night before. It felt like a lifetime ago. She was examining the books when she heard the door open softly. Sebastian stood in the doorway, still fully dressed despite the late hour. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too many thoughts," Ava admitted. "What if something goes wrong tomorrow? What if Catherine's connections are stronger than we anticipated? What if everything goes exactly as planned?" Sebastian interrupted gently. He crossed to stand beside her. "What if tomorrow night you reclaim everything that was stolen from you?" "That's almost more frightening," Ava confessed. "I've been invisible, Jay, for so long. What if I don't know how to be seen?" Sebastian turned to face her fully, his green eyes intense in the firelight. "Ava, you have never been invisible, not to the people who matter. The servants who protected you, Thomas and Martha who reported to Alexander, even your uncle who was watching from the shadows. We all saw you. Your kindness, your resilience, your strength." He reached out and gently touched her hand. "And I see you. I've seen you from the moment we met in the garden. Not as a victim to be pitied or a case to be solved, but as a remarkable woman who survived hell and came out with her humanity intact." Ava's breath caught. They were standing so close now. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. "Sebastian," she whispered, not even sure what she wanted to say. "I know this isn't the time," he said softly. "I know you need to focus on tomorrow, on Catherine, on reclaiming your life. But I needed you to know, when this is over, when you're free of her, I would very much like the chance to get to know you better. The real you. Not the frightened girl or the courageous survivor, but just Ava. Her heart was racing now. I'd like that too, she admitted. They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Sebastian stepped back, breaking the spell but leaving his warmth lingering. Get some rest, Lady Ashford. Tomorrow, we will go to war. After he left, Ava touched her hand where his fingers had been and allowed herself a small smile. Whatever tomorrow brought, triumph or disaster, she would face it knowing that someone saw her not as a burden or a victim, but as a woman worth fighting for. Worth fighting alongside. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if even the weather was conspiring for perfect drama. Ava woke to Martha bustling around her room with purpose. Today's the day, my lady, the older woman said, with fierce satisfaction. Time to remind everyone who you really are. The dress Alexander had commissioned for the ball hung on a stand by the window, a masterpiece of silk and lace in midnight blue, the exact color her mother had worn in the portrait above the fireplace. But it wasn't just beautiful. It was strategic. The dress was unmistakably expensive, unmistakably noble, impossible to mistake for anything but what it was, the gown of a duke's daughter. As Martha helped her dress hours later, as other maids styled her hair and fastened her mother's sapphire necklace around her throat, Ava watched her transformation in the mirror. This was psychological warfare, she realized. Catherine had spent 7 years stripping away Ava's identity, reducing her to nothing. Now, in one night, they would reverse it all. Every expensive jewel, every elegant detail, every inch of her appearance would declare, I am Lady Ava Ashford, and you cannot erase me. You look just like your mother, Martha said with tears in her eyes. She'd be so proud. A knock at the door revealed Alexander, dressed in full formal attire. When he saw Ava, he stopped, visibly moved. Edmund would have been proud too, he said quietly. You look every inch a duke's daughter. I don't feel like one, Ava admitted. I feel like I'm playing dress-up. Then, play the role until it becomes real. He offered his arm. The guests are arriving. Sebastian's evidence has been circulating all day. Half the ballroom already knows Catherine's secrets. She just doesn't know that they know. And if she realizes? If she doesn't take the bait? Alexander's smile was cold and determined. Then, we spring the trap anyway. Either way, Catherine's reign ends tonight. They descended the grand staircase together, and Ava heard the murmur of voices from the ballroom. Dozens of conversations, laughter, music. The elite of society, gathered in her home, about to witness either her greatest triumph or her utter destruction. At the ballroom entrance, Sebastian was waiting. He wore formal black, elegant and dangerous. But when he saw Ava, his expression transformed into something almost worshipful. You're breathtaking, he said simply. Before Ava could respond, the ballroom doors opened, and a servant's voice rang out. Duke Alexander Ashford and Lady Ava Ashford. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head in the room turned toward them, and there, at the far end of the ballroom in a gown of blood-red silk, stood Duchess Catherine, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. The game had begun. The ballroom of Ashford Manor was a glittering spectacle of candlelight and crystal. 300 candles blazed in the chandeliers above, casting dancing shadows across walls draped in ivory silk. The elite of the county swirled across the polished marble floor in their finest gowns and tailcoats, champagne flowing freely, string quartets playing from the gallery. But, as Ava descended the stairs on Alexander's arm, the music faltered. Dancers stopped mid-step. The glittering crowd parted like a wave, leaving a clear path through the center of the ballroom. Every eye was on her. Ava felt the weight of their stares. Shock, curiosity, recognition, confusion. She heard the whispers ripple through the crowd like wind through wheat. Is that Lady Ava? I thought she was away at finishing school. Good God, she looks exactly like Helena. When did she return? At the far end of the ballroom, Catherine stood frozen, her champagne flute trembling in her white-knuckled grip. Her carefully constructed smile had turned to stone. For just a moment, pure murderous rage flashed across her face before she locked it behind a mask of gracious surprise. "My dear stepdaughter." Catherine's voice rang out, bright and false. "What a lovely surprise. I had no idea you'd be joining us this evening." The emphasis on stepdaughter was deliberate, a reminder to everyone present of Catherine's position, her authority. Alexander's voice was equally clear, equally deliberate. "Lady Ava is the daughter of Duke Edmund Ashford, and heir to the Ashford estate. Her place has always been here, at my side, where she belongs." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. This was more than a social correction. This was a public declaration of allegiance, a line drawn in aristocratic sand. Catherine's smile never wavered, but her eyes promised retribution. Of course. How silly of me. I've simply been so worried about dear Ava's health. She's been so delicate lately. "I assure you I'm quite well, Your Grace," Ava said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Better than I've been in years." In fact, Lady Thornberry, a sharp-eyed matron who'd known Ava's mother, approached with genuine warmth. "Lady Ava, my dear child, how you've grown. You're the very image of Helena." She shot Catherine a meaningful look. "I've been asking after you for months, you know. The Duchess kept saying you were indisposed." "The Duchess has been most attentive," Ava replied carefully, the words carrying double meaning that wasn't lost on the observant. Sebastian appeared at Ava's elbow with a glass of champagne. "Lady Ava, you promised me the first dance, remember?" It was a lie, but a strategic one. Before Catherine could intervene, Sebastian swept Ava onto the dance floor. The orchestra, reading the room with professional precision, immediately began a waltz. As they moved across the floor, Sebastian's hand firm at her waist, he whispered, "You're doing brilliantly. Look at her, she's already rattled." Ava risked a glance. Catherine stood at the edge of the ballroom, surrounded by her usual sycophants, but her composure was cracking. She kept touching her throat, a nervous gesture Ava had never seen before. "Something's wrong," Ava murmured. "She's too agitated. I expected her to be more controlled." "The evidence reached more people than we anticipated," Sebastian replied. "Half this. Her knows about her first husband. She can feel the social ground shifting beneath her feet." As the waltz continued, other couples joined them on the floor, but Ava noticed many were keeping their distance from Catherine. Lord Pemberton, one of Catherine's former allies, had actually turned his back when she tried to speak to him. The trap was working. But then, Ava saw Catherine's expression change. The panic smoothed away, replaced by something cold and calculating. The Duchess smiled, a genuine smile, sharp as broken glass, and began moving through the crowd with renewed purpose. "Sebastian," Ava said, urgently. "She's planning something." Before he could respond, the music ended. Alexander appeared to claim Ava for the next dance, and Sebastian reluctantly stepped aside, but not before squeezing her hand in reassurance. "She's cornered," Alexander said as they began another waltz. "A cornered animal is most dangerous, but also most predictable. Whatever she does next will be desperate." "That doesn't comfort me. Desperate people make mistakes." His eyes scanned the ballroom. "I have guards positioned at every exit, disguised as footmen. If Catherine tries to flee, she won't get far." But Ava's attention was drawn to Catherine, who had cornered a young couple near the refreshment table. The way she was speaking, animated, distressed, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, sent alarm bells ringing. The dance ended, and immediately the young woman Catherine had been speaking to, Lady Ashworth, a notorious gossip, rushed to her friends with wide eyes and scandalized whispers. Within minutes, The whispers had spread like wildfire. Ava caught fragments as she moved through the crowd. Unstable since childhood. Violent tendencies. Attacked the Duchess just yesterday. The Duke is protecting her out of misguided loyalty. Ava's stomach dropped. Catherine was launching her counterattack, spreading her own version of events before the evidence against her could fully circulate. Sebastian reappeared, his expression dark. She's claiming you're mentally disturbed, that you've been having violent episodes. She's even implying that your parents' deaths weren't accidental, that you might have been involved. What? Ava felt the blood drain from her face. My mother died in childbirth, with me. My father was in a riding accident. How could I possibly— Logic doesn't matter to gossip, Alexander interjected grimly. She's planting seeds of doubt. By the time the real evidence reaches everyone, they won't know what to believe. Then we accelerate the plan, Sebastian said. We release everything now, publicly. But before they could move, a new voice cut through the ballroom chatter. If I might have everyone's attention. Catherine stood at the center of the ballroom, tears streaming artfully down her cheeks, every inch the suffering Duchess. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on her. I apologize for the disruption, Catherine said, her voice trembling with perfectly calculated emotion. But I can no longer remain silent. For 7 years, I have tried to be a mother to dear Ava. I have protected her, cared for her, hidden her troubles from society to spare her embarrassment. Ava felt Sebastian's hand on her arm, steadying her. But tonight, Catherine continued, I realize I may have done her a disservice. Perhaps if I had sought help sooner, if I had been honest about her condition, she might have received the treatment she needs. This is a lie, Ava said, but her voice was lost in the murmurs of the crowd. Catherine turned to face her directly, and the false sympathy in her eyes was masterful. Oh, my dear child. I know you don't mean to cause trouble. I know the delusions feel real to you. But these accusations you've been making, these stories about abuse and cruelty. She shook her head sadly. The doctors warned me this might happen. Paranoia, they said. A fractured mind creating enemies where there are none. That's enough. Alexander's voice rang out like a gunshot. He strode to the center of the ballroom, positioning himself between Catherine and Ava. You've played your hand, Catherine. Now I'll play mine. He gestured to Sebastian, who produced a leather portfolio from inside his coat. Lord Thorne, if you would. Sebastian's voice carried to every corner of the silent ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, I have here documented evidence of Duchess Catherine's systematic abuse of Lady Ava over the past 7 years. Witness testimonies from servants, medical records showing injuries, even financial documents, proving the Duchess has been embezzling from Lady Ava's inheritance. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Catherine's face went pale. Furthermore, Sebastian continued, I have evidence that Catherine poisoned her first husband, Lord Caldwell, in order to inherit his fortune before marrying Duke Alexander. A letter in her own hand, requesting specific compounds known to cause the exact symptoms Lord Caldwell displayed before his death. This is preposterous, Catherine shrieked, her composure finally shattering. This is a conspiracy. They've forged documents to discredit me. The handwriting has been verified by 3 independent experts, Sebastian said coldly, as has the apothecary's testimony. The crowd was murmuring now, shocked and scandal-hungry. But then Catherine laughed. A wild, desperate sound. You think you've won? Do you think this changes anything? She whirled on Alexander. Did you tell her the truth, dear husband? Did you tell your precious niece why you really married me? Alexander's expression went carefully blank. Catherine, don't. He knew, Catherine screamed. Alexander knew about my first husband from the beginning. He needed my family's political connections, and I needed the Ashford fortune, It was a business arrangement. The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. Ava felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. "That's not true," she whispered, looking at Alexander. "Tell me that's not true." Alexander's silence was damning. "Oh, it gets better," Catherine continued, her voice dripping venom. "Tell her why you really needed those political connections, Alexander. Tell her about the debts Edmund left behind. Tell her how the great Ashford fortune was actually bankrupt." "No," Ava breathed. Alexander closed his eyes. "Ava, I can explain." "Your father was a gambler and a fool," Catherine said, with vicious satisfaction. "By the time he died, the estate was drowning in debt. Alexander needed my family's money and influence to prevent total financial collapse, and I needed access to your inheritance, which would become available when you turned 21. We were partners." Ava felt tears burning her eyes. "You knew she would hurt me? You knew and you let her because you needed her money?" "At first, I truly didn't know the extent of her cruelty," Alexander said, his voice raw. "But later, yes. I knew. And I did nothing because I needed time to secure the estate's future before I could safely remove her. I thought if I could just stabilize the finances, gather enough evidence." "You sacrificed me," Ava said, the betrayal cutting deeper than any of Catherine's physical blows. "You let her torture me for years to save your precious estate. To save your inheritance." Alexander's composure cracked. "If I had confronted Catherine before securing the finances, she would have revealed the debts publicly. Creditors would have seized everything. You would have been left with nothing, Ava. I was trying to protect you." "By letting her break me?" Ava's voice broke. "By watching her turn me into a servant in my own home?" Sebastian stepped forward, his hand reaching for Ava's, but she pulled away. She felt surrounded by lies, drowning in revelations that rewrote everything she thought she understood. "And you?" She turned to Sebastian. "Did you know about this arrangement?" Sebastian's hesitation was answered enough. "I learned about it during my investigation," he admitted. "But Ava, whatever Alexander's original motivations, his remorse is genuine. The evidence he gathered, the plan to free you, that's real. How do I know anything is real?" Ava looked around at the crowd of aristocrats watching her unraveling like it was theater. "How do I know this entire night isn't just another manipulation?" Catherine laughed, wild and triumphant despite her own exposure. "At last, the girl sees clearly. We're all using you, darling. Your uncle for his estate, me for your fortune, even Lord Thorne. Why do you think he's been so attentive? So protective?" She leaned in close, whispering loud enough for others to hear. "Men like him don't rescue broken girls out of kindness. They do it for the reward. And what better reward than a wealthy, vulnerable heiress?" "That's a lie," Sebastian said, his voice hard as iron. "Ava, don't listen to her." But Ava couldn't breathe. The ballroom felt like it was closing in. All these people staring, judging, whispering. 7 years of abuse, and now she learns it was all part of a calculated arrangement? That the uncle she'd trusted had sold her suffering for financial stability? "I need air," she gasped. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring Alexander calling her name, ignoring Sebastian trying to follow. She burst through the French doors onto the terrace, the cool night air hitting her like a slap. Behind her, she could hear the ballroom erupting into chaos. Catherine's shrill voice, Alexander's commands, the scandal-hungry crowd devouring every moment of aristocratic drama. She'd been right to fear being seen. Being invisible had been painful. But this public dissection of her trauma, this revelation of betrayal upon betrayal, this was agony. Ava gripped the terrace railing, tears streaming down her face. She'd thought tonight would be her triumph, her vindication. Instead, it had become her complete destruction. And the worst part? She didn't know who to trust anymore. Everyone had lied. Everyone had used her. "Ava." She spun to find Sebastian standing in the doorway, his expression devastated. "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Don't come near me. Everything Catherine said about me, it's not true. I'm not here for money or reward. I'm here because—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "Because from the moment I saw you in that garden, I saw someone worth fighting for. Not for what you have, but for who you are." "How can I believe you?" Ava's voice cracked. "You knew about Alexander's arrangement and you said nothing. I wanted to tell you, but it wasn't my secret to reveal. And I thought if Alexander could explain in his own time, in his own way—" He took a step closer. "I was wrong. I should have told you. But Ava, my feelings for you, those are real. Those have nothing to do with estates or fortunes or strategy." Ava wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that someone, somewhere in this nightmare, actually cared about her without an agenda. But before she could respond, a scream split the night air. It came from inside the ballroom, a woman's terrified shriek, followed by shouts and the sound of breaking glass. Ava and Sebastian rushed back inside to find total chaos. Catherine stood at the center of the ballroom, a pistol in her trembling hand, pointed directly at Alexander. "If I'm going down," Catherine said, her voice eerily calm now, all pretense abandoned, "I'm taking you with me." And in that frozen moment, with 300 aristocrats watching in horror, Catherine pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked through the ballroom like thunder. Time seemed to slow. Ava watched in horror as Alexander staggered backward, his hand clutching his shoulder. Blood bloomed across his white shirt, spreading like scarlet ink on paper. "No!" Ava screamed. Sebastian was already moving, tackling Catherine before she could fire again. The pistol skittered across the marble floor as they crashed to the ground. Women shrieked. Men shouted. The ballroom descended into pandemonium. Ava ran to Alexander, falling to her knees beside him. "Uncle! Please!" "I'm all right," he gasped, though his face was pale. "Shoulder. Not fatal. But there was so much blood. Too much blood." Lord Pemberton was already shouting for a doctor. Servants rushed forward with linens. The crowd pressed in, morbidly fascinated, until Sebastian roared, "Give them space!" Guards, the ones Alexander had positioned throughout the ballroom, finally swarmed Catherine, dragging her to her feet. But she was laughing, wild and unhinged. "Do you see?" Catherine shrieked at the crowd. "Do you see what they've driven me to? Years of that girl's madness, her accusations, her lies. I couldn't take it anymore." "You just shot a man in front of 300 witnesses," Sebastian said coldly, still restraining her. "Your performance is over." "Is it?" Catherine's smile was terrible. "Look around, Lord Thorne. Half this room still thinks I'm the victim." The devoted wife is driven to desperation by a disturbed stepdaughter and a husband who betrayed her. And horrifyingly, Ava could see it in some faces. Doubt, sympathy, the perverse logic of society that could twist even attempted murder into a tragic tale of feminine hysteria. The doctor arrived, pushing through the crowd to examine Alexander. "We need to get him upstairs. The bullet needs to come out immediately." As servants helped Alexander to his feet, his face gray with pain, he looked at Ava. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. I thought I was protecting you, but I only made things worse." "Don't talk," Ava said through her tears. "Just don't die. Not planning on it." He managed a weak smile before the servants led him away. Sebastian turned to the guards. "Take the Duchess to the cellars and lock her in. Send it to the magistrate immediately." But as the guards moved to comply, a new voice rang out. "I think not." A man stepped through the crowd, tall, silver-haired, dressed in the formal robes of a magistrate. But Ava recognized him from Catherine's descriptions. Lord Caldwell, Catherine's cousin, the corrupt official who'd been her insurance policy all along. "Lord Caldwell," Sebastian said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "How convenient that you're here." "I am the chief magistrate of this county," Caldwell said smoothly. "And I will not stand by while a woman is falsely accused and brutalized." He gestured to Catherine. "Release her immediately." "She just attempted murder in front of hundreds of witnesses," Sebastian protested. I see a woman driven to defend herself against a conspiracy. Caldwell's smile was oil-slick. The Duke himself admitted to a corrupt arrangement with my cousin. He confessed to allowing abuse to continue for financial gain. And now he seeks to destroy her to cover his own crimes? The crowd murmured. The narrative was shifting, twisting. Furthermore, Caldwell continued, producing a document from his coat. I have here a petition signed by 3 physicians declaring Lady Ava Ashford mentally unfit. They recommend immediate commitment to St. Agnes Asylum for her own protection and the safety of others. Ava's blood ran cold. That's not possible. I've never been examined by any. The physicians were hired by the Duchess months ago, Caldwell interrupted, out of motherly concern for your declining mental state. They've documented numerous incidents of violence, delusions, and instability. Those are fabrications. Sebastian moved toward Caldwell. But guards, Caldwell's guards, Ava realized with horror, blocked his path. This entire evening has been a setup, Caldwell declared to the crowd. A disturbed young woman, encouraged by her guilt-ridden uncle and an opportunistic fortune hunter, has launched a vicious campaign to destroy a woman who only ever tried to help her. That's a lie, Ava's voice broke. I'm not insane. She's the one who what, dear? Catherine had composed herself now, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Who tried to give you structure, discipline? Who attempted to prepare you for society despite your difficulties? She turned to the crowd, the picture of wounded dignity. I endured years of verbal abuse, violent outbursts, and stolen property. I tried everything. Patience, kindness, professional help. And tonight, when I could bear no more, when I feared for my very life, her voice broke perfectly. I acted in self-defense. You shot an unarmed man, Sebastian roared. An unarmed man who confessed to a conspiracy against me, Caldwell corrected, who by his own admission allowed harm to come to his niece for financial gain. Who then, racked with guilt, turned against his own wife to absolve himself. The logic was insane, twisted, but Ava could see it working, could see the doubt spreading through the crowd like poison. The aristocracy loved a tragedy, loved a fallen woman, loved the narrative of feminine suffering. Catherine was giving them exactly what they wanted. By the authority vested in me, Caldwell announced, I hereby order Lady Ava Ashford committed to St. Agnes Asylum for evaluation and treatment. She is to be taken into custody immediately for her own welfare. No! Ava backed away as guards advanced on her. Sebastian, do something! But Sebastian was being restrained by 4 guards, struggling furiously. This is illegal. You can't. I can, and I am. Caldwell's smile was victorious. As for you, Lord Thorne, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and for assault on the Duchess. Take him as well. On what grounds? Sebastian demanded. The grounds that I say so. Caldwell leaned in close. My family takes care of its own, Lord Thorne. You should have learned that before you declared war on us. Ava felt hands grip her arms, rough, unyielding. She struggled, but she was no match for the guards. Let her go! Sebastian fought like a demon, but he was outnumbered and finally subdued. The last thing Ava saw as they dragged her toward the doors was Catherine's smile, cold, triumphant, absolute. She'd won. Despite the evidence, despite the witnesses, despite everything, she'd somehow won. Enjoy the asylum, darling, Catherine called sweetly. I hear it's very educational. Then Ava was in the corridor, being hauled toward a waiting carriage, and the nightmare was becoming horrifyingly real. St. Agnes Asylum. She'd heard stories about that place, a prison disguised as a hospital, where inconvenient women were locked away and forgotten, where brutal treatments broke minds that were perfectly sound, where women went in alive and came out as ghosts. Please, she begged the guards. Please, I'm not insane. This is a mistake. That's what they all say, miss, one guard said, not unkindly. But the magistrate's word is law. Outside, rain had begun to fall, cold and merciless. They shoved Ava into a windowless carriage. Through the open door, she could see Sebastian still fighting, screaming her name, blood running from a cut above his eye. Then the door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. The carriage lurched forward, and Ava collapsed against the hard wooden bench, sobbing. Everything had fallen apart. Alexander was shot and might be dying. Sebastian was arrested. Catherine and her cousin had outmaneuvered them completely. And Ava was being taken to an asylum, where she would be locked away, possibly drugged or tortured, until she genuinely did lose her mind, or simply cease to exist in any way that mattered. She dared to hope, dared to fight back, dared to believe she could win. And hope had destroyed her more thoroughly than Catherine's cruelty ever had. In the darkness of the carriage, Ava pressed her face against her knees and surrendered to despair. This was the end. This was how her story finished. Not with triumph, but with madness and darkness and defeat. The carriage rolled through the rain toward St. Agnes, and with every turn of the wheels, Ava felt herself breaking into pieces that would never be whole again. Catherine had won. And Ava had lost everything. The asylum carriage rattled through the rain-soaked night, each jolt sending Ava sliding across the hard wooden bench. She'd cried until there were no tears left, until her throat was raw and her eyes burned. Now she sat in the darkness, numb and hollow. This is how it ends, she thought. Not with justice, but with madness. The carriage suddenly lurched to a violent stop. Ava was thrown forward, catching herself against the opposite bench. Raised voices came from outside, angry, urgent. "Stand aside. This carriage is under the authority of Magistrate Caldwell. And this road is under the authority of the Crown. Show me your warrant." That second voice. Ava's heart leaped. She knew that voice. The carriage door was wrenched open, rain pouring in. A figure in a dark cloak stood silhouetted against the stormy sky. But Ava would have recognized him anywhere. "Sebastian," she breathed. "Forgive the dramatic rescue," he said, extending his hand. "But I couldn't let you face the asylum alone." "How did you—" "They arrested you." "They tried." His smile was fierce, despite the blood still visible on his temple. Turns out Caldwell overplayed his hand. Arresting a peer of the realm without proper cause drew attention he didn't want. Lord Hastings, Alexander's contact in the capital, was at the ball. He intervened. Sebastian pulled Ava from the carriage. Outside, she saw the guards who'd been transporting her now restrained by king's soldiers in royal livery. A distinguished older man sat astride a magnificent horse, rain streaming off his officer's cloak. "Lady Ava," the man said, with a respectful nod. "Lord Hastings, at your service. I apologize for the delay. It took time to mobilize my men." "The Duke?" Ava asked urgently. "Is he—" "Alive," Sebastian assured her quickly. "The bullet passed clean through his shoulder. He's weak from blood loss, but the doctor says he'll recover fully." Relief nearly buckled Ava's knees. Sebastian's arm went around her waist, steadying her. But Catherine and Caldwell, they won. Everyone saw a carefully constructed performance," Lord Hastings interrupted. "But performances fall apart under scrutiny. Come, we rode to Hastings Hall. You'll be safe there while we regroup." Within minutes, Ava was wrapped in a dry cloak and seated in front of Sebastian on his horse, his arms secure around her as they galloped through the rain. She should have been terrified, exhausted, broken. Instead, pressed against Sebastian's chest, hearing his steady heartbeat beneath her ear, she felt something else stirring. Anger. Pure, righteous fury. Catherine had taken everything from her, her childhood, her dignity, her peace. And tonight, she'd nearly taken her future. Had come so close to locking Ava away where she'd be tortured and forgotten. But Ava wasn't locked away. She was free, riding through the storm, surrounded by people who were fighting for her. And she was done being a victim. We're going back, she said suddenly. Sebastian's arms tightened slightly. What? To Ashford Manor. To finish this. Ava twisted to look up at him, rain streaming down her face. Catherine thinks she's won. We're going to prove her wrong. Ava, you've been through hell tonight. You need rest. I need justice. Her voice was steel. And I'm tired of letting other people fight my battles while I cower and hide. Lord Hastings, riding beside them, let out a bark of approving laughter. She has fire, this one. I see why you spoke so highly of her. Thorne. They reached Hastings Hall an hour later, a fortified estate that spoke of old military power. Inside, servants rushed to provide dry clothes and hot food, but Ava barely noticed her surroundings. Her mind was racing, pieces clicking together. Catherine made a mistake tonight, she said as they gathered in Lord Hastings's study. Several, actually. Sebastian handed her a cup of tea, which she wrapped her frozen hands around gratefully. Go on. She shot Alexander in front of 300 witnesses. No matter how Caldwell twists it, that's attempted murder. But more than that. Ava's eyes narrowed. She was admitted to the medical evaluations, the ones claiming I'm insane. Forgeries, Sebastian said. Paid physicians who never examined you. Exactly. Which means there's a paper trail. Payments, correspondence, appointments that never happened. Ava looked between the two men. If we can prove those documents are fraudulent, it undermines Catherine's entire defense. She's not a desperate woman acting in self-defense. She's a calculating criminal who planned my commitment months in advance. Lord Hastings smiled slowly. The girl has a tactical mind. I've had 7 years to study my enemy, Ava said quietly. I know what Catherine thinks. She's thorough. But she's also arrogant. She keeps records of everything. Insurance against betrayal, leverage against her allies. Those medical documents? She'll have kept the originals, probably with proof of payment. Hidden somewhere in Ashford Manor, Sebastian said, understanding Dawn. But where? Ava closed her eyes, thinking. Where would Catherine keep her most damning secrets? Somewhere she could access easily, but where no servant would stumble across them. Somewhere private. Secure. Her eyes snapped open. Her dressing room. There's a false panel on the floor, beneath the ottoman. I saw her hide something there once, years ago. When she caught me watching, Ava touched her ribs unconsciously, remembering. She made sure I wouldn't look again. Then that's where we start, Lord Hastings said decisively. But infiltrating the manor while Catherine and Caldwell are still in residence will require strategy. Leave that to me, Sebastian said. I've infiltrated better guarded places than Ashford Manor. But Ava stays here. Safe. No. Ava set down her teacup with a sharp click. I'm going with you. Absolutely not. If Catherine catches you, she won't, because she thinks I'm locked in an asylum carriage, broken and helpless. Ava stood, and despite her borrowed dress and disheveled appearance, she suddenly looked every inch a duke's daughter. I know that manor better than anyone. Every servant's passage, every creaking floorboard, every hiding place. You need me. Sebastian looked at Lord Hastings helplessly. The older man chuckled. I learned long ago never to argue with a determined woman, especially one who's right. He stood, moving to a large map spread across his desk. Very well. We plan for a dawn raid. While the household sleeps, we retrieve the evidence and extract the Duke, if his condition allows transport. For the next hour, they strategized. Lord Hastings would position his soldiers around the estate's perimeter, cutting off escape routes. Sebastian and Ava would enter through the servants' entrance, the one that led directly to the old wine cellars, which connected to a passage near the family wing. Martha will help us, Ava said. And Thomas. They've been loyal to my family from the beginning. As they finalized details, Ava found herself watching Sebastian. The careful way he marked entry points on the map, the strategic mind that had brought down corrupt nobles before Catherine. But also the gentle way he'd held her on the horse, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes when he'd opened that carriage door. Catherine's poison words from the ball echoed. Men like him don't rescue broken girls out of kindness. They do it for the reward. Sebastian, Ava said quietly when Lord Hastings stepped out to brief his soldiers. Earlier, at the ball. What Catherine said about you was designed to hurt you, to isolate you. He moved closer. Ava, I meant what I said on the terrace. My feelings for you have nothing to do with your fortune or your title. Then what are they about? She needed to hear it. Needed something real in a night of lies and manipulation. Sebastian reached out, his fingers gently brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. They're about a woman who survived 7 years of hell and remained kind. Who protected servants even when she had no power to protect herself. Who looked at me in a garden and made me believe in something beyond cynicism and strategy. His voice softened. They're about you, Ava. Just you. The air between them seemed to crackle with intensity. Ava's breath caught as Sebastian's hand lingered near her cheek, his eyes searching hers. When this is over, he said quietly, when Catherine is imprisoned and you're free, may I court you properly. No strategies, no schemes. Just a man who very much wants to know everything about the remarkable woman you are? Ava's answer was to close the distance between them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, questioning. Then Sebastian's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Ava felt 7 years of loneliness and pain begin to dissolve in the warmth of being held, wanted, cherished. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. I'll take that as a yes, he murmured. Despite everything, the terror of the evening, the battle still ahead, Ava smiled. A real smile. One that came from somewhere deep and genuine. Yes, she whispered. When this is over, yes to everything. A discreet cough from the doorway made them spring apart. Lord Hastings stood there with poorly concealed amusement. The men are ready. We move in 2 hours. Just before dawn when the household is deep asleep. He looked at Ava with newfound respect. Are you certain you're prepared for this, my lady? What we're about to do is dangerous. Ava thought of her mother, who'd fought for servants' rights and challenged unjust laws. She thought of her father, who'd taught her that true nobility meant standing up for what was right. She thought of 7 years of silence and suffering. I've been preparing for this my entire life, she said. Let's end it. 2 hours later, as the sky was just beginning to lighten from black to deep gray, Ava found herself crouched beside Sebastian in the wine cellars of Ashford Manor. They'd entered without incident, the old key Ava remembered still hidden under the loose stone by the door. The cellars were silent except for the sound of their breathing and the distant scurrying of mice. Sebastian lit a small covered lantern, keeping the light minimal. The passage is here, Ava whispered, pressing a specific stone in the wall. A section of wall swung inward, with a soft groan. A servant's passage built centuries ago for discretion. They moved through the narrow corridor, Ava leading the way with the confidence of someone who'd once explored every inch of her home. She could hear Sebastian's quiet footsteps behind her, his presence both comforting and energizing. They emerged near the family wing, in a small alcove behind a tapestry. Ava listened carefully. The manor was silent, the household asleep. Catherine's chambers are down this corridor, Ava breathed. 3rd door on the left. They moved like ghosts through the darkened hallway. Ava's heart hammered so loudly she was certain it would wake someone. But they reached Catherine's door without incident. Locked. Allow me, Sebastian murmured, pulling what looked like small picks from his coat. One of many useful skills from my less reputable days. Within seconds, the lock clicked open, They slipped inside. Catherine's chambers were opulent, all silk and velvet and expensive furnishings purchased with Ava's inheritance. The dressing room was through a connecting door. Ava moved toward it, then froze. Voices coming from the hallway. "Don't care what hour it is. I want guards posted at every entrance. If Thorn manages to escape, he'll come back for the girl." Catherine's voice, sharp and commanding. Sebastian grabbed Ava's hand, pulling her toward the wardrobe. They squeezed inside just as the bedroom door opened and candlelight flooded the room. Through the crack in the wardrobe doors, Ava could see Catherine enter, still wearing her ball gown, Caldwell behind her. "You worry too much, cousin," Caldwell said. "The girl is halfway to the asylum by now, and Thorn is in chains. You underestimate them both." Catherine moved to her vanity, beginning to remove her jewelry. "Alexander has been planning this for months. Thorn has resources we don't fully understand. And that girl, Her voice turned venomous. "She's proven surprisingly resilient. Resilient or not, she's finished. By tomorrow she'll be drugged and docile in St. Brave. Agnes, and in a week we'll have her declared permanently incompetent. The fortune will be ours." In the wardrobe, Ava felt Sebastian's hand tighten around hers. She barely dared to breathe. "And Alexander?" Catherine asked. "Recovering, unfortunately. But his reputation is destroyed. No one will believe his accusations now. Not after his own confession of corruption." Caldwell poured himself a brandy. "You played it perfectly, Catherine. I always do." She began unpinning her hair. "Though I admit shooting him was impulsive. Satisfying, but impulsive. It worked in our favor. Make you look desperate and sympathetic rather than calculating." He raised his glass to her. "To our success." Catherine smiled coldly. "To destroy anyone who dares challenge us." They drank. Then Catherine moved toward the dressing room. Ava's heart stopped. If Catherine entered the dressing room, she would see the wardrobe. And if she opened it... But Caldwell called her back. "Before you retire, we need to discuss the transfer of Ava's assets. I've prepared documents." "Not here." Catherine's voice was sharp. "My private study. The documents are in the safe there, along with everything else I'd rather the servants not stumble upon." Ava's breath caught. The study. Not the dressing room. The study. She'd been wrong about the hiding place. Catherine and Caldwell left the bedroom, their voices fading down the corridor. Sebastian and Ava tumbled out of the wardrobe, both gasping for air. "The study," Ava whispered urgently. "It's in the East Wing. But if they're going there now, then we follow." Sebastian's eyes gleamed with determination. Carefully. They slipped back into the corridor, keeping to the shadows. Ahead, they could see the flicker of Catherine's candle as she and Caldwell walked toward the East Wing. Ava's mind raced. The study was Catherine's private domain. She allowed no servants inside, cleaned it herself. If the documents were there, along with everything else, then this was Catherine's vault of secrets. They watched from behind a pillar as Catherine and Caldwell entered the study. The door closed, but didn't latch completely. "We wait for them to leave," Sebastian whispered. "Then we search." But before Ava could respond, a new sound froze them both. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Coming from the main staircase. Lord Hastings appeared, flanked by 6 armed soldiers. He spotted Ava and Sebastian and quickly moved to join them. "Change of plans," he said quietly. "One of the guests from the ball, Lady Thornberry, rode to my estate an hour ago. She's prepared to testify that Caldwell threatened her into silence, that she witnessed Catherine abusing Ava years ago, but was too frightened to speak up." He smiled grimly. "The tide is turning. We move now, while we have momentum." "Catherine and Caldwell are in the study," Sebastian informed him. "They just mentioned documents, proof of the conspiracy." Lord Hastings' expression hardened. "Then we end this. Now." He strode to the study door and threw it open without ceremony. His soldiers flooded in behind him. Catherine's scream of rage echoed through the manor. "What is the meaning of this?" Caldwell demanded. "This is illegal entry. And you, sir, are under arrest for corruption, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." Lord Hastings's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "By order of the King's High Court." "On whose authority?" Caldwell sputtered. "I am a magistrate." "You were a magistrate. As of 3 hours ago, you've been stripped of your position pending investigation into 17 counts of bribery and falsified legal documents." Lord Hastings gestured to his men. "Seize him." As soldiers moved to restrain a protesting Caldwell, Catherine's eyes found Ava standing in the doorway. Pure hatred blazed across her face. You should be in the asylum. You should be broken." Ava stepped into the room, and her voice was steady as stone. "You've been trying to break me for 7 years, Catherine. It didn't work. Everything I did to prepare you for the real world," Catherine shrieked. Her composure completely shattered now. "You were weak, pathetic, just like your mother." "My mother was stronger than you'll ever be," Ava said quietly. "She led with kindness. You rule through fear, and fear is a weak foundation. It crumbles the moment someone stands up to it." Sebastian moved to the open safe behind Catherine's desk. He pulled out stack after stack of documents, financial records, forged medical evaluations, letters to corrupt physicians, and most damning of all, a ledger detailing 7 years of embezzlement from Ava's inheritance. "It's all here," he said, wondering in his voice. "Every crime meticulously documented." "Why?" Ava asked, genuinely confused. "Why keep evidence of your own guilt?" Catherine laughed bitterly. "Insurance, leverage, proof of Caldwell's involvement if he ever tried to betray me." She looked at the papers with something like affection. "I learned long ago, information is power. Even information that could destroy you, if properly used." "Well, it's destroying you now," Lord Hastings said flatly. "Duchess Catherine Ashford, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and abuse of a minor under your care." As soldiers moved to restrain her, Catherine's mask finally, completely shattered. She lunged at Ava with a feral scream, nails extended like claws. Sebastian caught her mid-leap, forcing her back. "You were nothing!" Catherine shrieked, struggling against the soldiers now holding her. "A pathetic orphan who should have been grateful I didn't throw you into the streets. I gave you purpose. I gave you structure. And this is how you repay me?" Ava looked at the woman who'd tormented her for 7 years, and felt nothing. No fear, no hatred. Just a vast, peaceful emptiness where Catherine's shadow had once loomed. "You gave me nothing," Ava said quietly, "except a very clear understanding of who I never want to become." Catherine was still screaming obscenities as the soldiers dragged her from the room, but Ava had already turned away. Some things didn't deserve her attention anymore. Lord Hastings began cataloging the documents, his face growing grimmer with each page. "This goes deeper than we thought. Catherine and Caldwell have been running a scheme for years, targeting wealthy orphans, manipulating guardianships, embezzling fortunes." He looked at Ava with something like awe. "You weren't her first victim. You were just the first one brave enough to fight back." The weight of that settled over Ava. How many others had suffered? How many had been broken by Catherine's calculated cruelty? "We can save them now," Sebastian said softly, reading her expression. "This evidence will free anyone else caught in their web." Dawn light was beginning to stream through the study windows, painting everything gold. Ava moved to the window and looked out over the grounds of Ashford Manor. Her home, finally free of the monster who'd haunted it. Lady Ava. She turned to find Martha standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her weathered face. Behind her stood Thomas, William, Mrs. Kemper, and a dozen other servants. We heard the commotion, Martha said. Is it true? Is she really arrested? It's true, Ava said. For a moment, there was silence. Then Martha began to clap. One by one, the other servants joined until the sound filled the manor. Not polite applause, but the fierce, joyous celebration of people who'd lived under tyranny and finally witnessed its end. Ava felt tears prick her eyes. But this time, they were tears of relief, of triumph, of an ending that felt like a beginning. Sebastian appeared at her side, his hand finding hers. Ready to see your uncle? He's been asking for you. Together, they walked through the manor, no longer sneaking through shadows, but walking openly through halls where Ava finally, truly, belonged. Alexander was propped up in his bed, pale but alert, his shoulder heavily bandaged. When he saw Ava, his eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, he said hoarsely, for all of it, for failing you, for letting my guilt and fear cloud my judgment, for... Ava sat on the edge of his bed and took his hand. You gathered evidence for 3 years. You planned my rescue. You took a bullet, meant to destroy Catherine's last defense. She smiled through her own tears. You didn't fail me, Uncle. You saved me. We saved each other, Alexander said. You reminded me what true courage looks like. They sat in comfortable silence as morning fully arrived, washing away the darkness of the longest night. It was over. Catherine was arrested. Caldwell was disgraced. The evidence was secured. But as Ava sat there, Sebastian standing quietly supportive nearby, Lord Hastings organizing the legal proceedings in the corridor, she felt a strange unease. Something wasn't finished. Something was still waiting to be revealed. And she was right. 3 hours later, as they were preparing Catherine's formal transfer to the King's prison, a rider arrived from London. He carried a sealed letter addressed to Duke Alexander Ashford, from the late Duke Edmund, Ava's father, written the day before he died. And as Alexander broke the seal with trembling hands, as his face went white reading the contents, Ava realized that the night's revelations were far from over. The biggest truth was still waiting to be uncovered. Alexander's hands trembled as he unfolded the yellowed letter. The wax seal bore his brother Edmund's crest, the Ashford lion, pressed into crimson wax 7 years ago by hands that would be cold within 24 hours. Ava moved closer, her heart pounding. Uncle? What does it say? Alexander's face had gone ashen. His lips moved silently as he read, his eyes widening with each line. When he finally looked up, the devastation in his expression made Ava's blood run cold. Alexander? Sebastian stepped forward, concerned. It wasn't an accident, Alexander whispered. Edmund's death. It wasn't an accident. The room seemed to tilt. Ava gripped the bedpost to steady herself. What? He knew. Alexander's voice broke. He knew he was dying, and he knew who was killing him. His hand clenched around the letter. Read it. You need to read it. With shaking hands, Ava took the letter. Her father's handwriting, elegant, familiar, achingly dear, swam before her eyes. She blinked away tears and began to read aloud so Sebastian and Lord Hastings could hear. My dearest brother Alexander. If you are reading this, then I am dead, and my worst fears have been realized. I write this in haste and in secret, for I believe I have very little time remaining. 3 weeks ago, I began experiencing symptoms, tremors, weakness, sudden bouts of illness. I dismissed them at first as simple fatigue, but yesterday I found arsenic powder hidden in my study, and I finally understood. Someone is poisoning me, slowly, carefully, in doses small enough to mimic natural illness. I confronted the person I suspected, and in her rage, she confessed everything. Not just my murder, but plans that extend far beyond my death. Plans that involve you, Alexander. Plans that involve my daughter. Ava's voice faltered. Sebastian's hand came to rest supportively on her shoulder as she continued. Her name is Catherine Caldwell. You haven't met her yet, brother. But you will. She has engineered it so. Catherine was Lady Helena's companion in the months before Helena's death. I hired her to help my wife through her difficult pregnancy, never suspecting the viper I'd welcomed into our home. Helena didn't die from childbirth complications, Alexander. She was murdered. Catherine gave her something, I don't know what, that caused the hemorrhaging. She confessed this to me yesterday with chilling pride. Your wife was too good, Catherine said. Too perfect. She had everything. Your love, this estate, a child on the way, the respect of society. It made me sick to watch, so I took it from her. All of it. Ava's hands were shaking so badly now that Sebastian had to take the letter and continue reading for her. But Catherine didn't just want Helena dead. She wanted everything Helena had. The title, the fortune, the position. She's been planning this for years, brother. Learning our family's weaknesses, cultivating connections, positioning herself. She told me she has an ally, a cousin in the magistracy who will help her manipulate the legal system. Together, they've done this before. Wealthy widowers with young children. They target families, infiltrate them, and drain them dry. I am already too far gone to save. The poison has done its work. But Ava, Alexander, you must protect Ava. Catherine plans to kill me and make it look like an accident. Then she will wait. 1 year. Perhaps 2, before coincidentally meeting you. She'll charm you, seduce you if necessary, and convince you to marry her. Once she has legal authority over Ava and access to the Ashford fortune, she will systematically destroy my daughter. Not quickly. Catherine enjoys cruelty too much for that. She will break Ava slowly, through isolation and abuse, until my daughter either dies or is driven mad enough to be institutionalized. I have tried to gather evidence, but Catherine has been thorough. She will destroy this letter if she finds it, so I'm entrusting it to my solicitor with instructions to deliver it to you only if my death appears suspicious. I'm sorry, brother. Sorry to leave you with this burden. Sorry I wasn't clever enough to stop her. Sorry I won't live to see my daughter grow into the remarkable woman I know she'll become. But I have one request. Make Catherine pay. For Helena. For me. For every moment of suffering she inflicts on Ava. And tell my daughter. Tell her that her father's last thoughts were of her. That I loved her more than life itself. That if there's any justice in heaven, I'll be watching over her always. Protect her, Alexander. Where I failed, you must succeed. Your brother, Edmund. Silence filled the room like a physical presence. Ava couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The world had narrowed to a single terrible truth. Catherine had murdered her mother, had murdered her father, had orchestrated every moment of suffering for the past 7 years as part of a plan conceived before Ava was even born. She killed them both, Ava whispered. My mother, my father. She killed them both and then tortured me for years as part of some sick, calculated plan. The solicitor, Lord Hastings said urgently. Why didn't he deliver this letter sooner? Why wait 7 years? Alexander's face hardened with understanding. Because Edmund's death didn't appear suspicious. The doctors ruled it a riding accident, a tragic fall, nothing more. The letter was meant to be delivered only if foul play was suspected. His voice turned bitter. Catherine was too clever. She made it look completely natural. But why send it now? Sebastian asked. I may have an answer to that. A new voice spoke from the doorway. An elderly man in solicitor's robes stood there, his face grave. Mr. Pemberton, Alexander said, recognizing him. Edmund's solicitor. You brought this letter? I did, Your Grace. I apologize for the delay. I've been in Scotland for the past 5 years settling a complex estate. When I returned to London last week and heard rumors of trouble at Ashford Manor, I reviewed Edmund's files and found this. He entered the room, his eyes finding Ava with deep sadness. I'm so sorry, Lady Ava. If I had known, if I had been here. You couldn't have known, Ava said, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. None of us could. There's more, Pemberton continued. I've been investigating since I found the letter. Catherine Caldwell has done this before, at least 3 times that I can confirm. Wealthy widowers, young children, mysterious deaths. She and her cousin Caldwell have been running this scheme for over a decade. Good God, Lord Hastings breathed. How many families has she destroyed? At least 4, possibly more. The pattern is always the same. Infiltrate as a companion or acquaintance, poison the patriarch, wait a strategic amount of time, then, coincidentally, meet and marry the heir or guardian. She gains control of the fortune and either slowly drains it or, if there are children, drives them to madness or death to secure the inheritance permanently. Ava felt Sebastian's arms come around her, the only thing keeping her upright. This was beyond cruelty, beyond evil. This was calculated, serial murder, spanning years. She needs to know, Ava said suddenly. Catherine needs to know that we found the letter, that we know everything. Ava. Alexander protested weakly from his bed. Sebastian cupped her face in his hands. You don't need to face her again. Let the law handle you. I don't see scars. I see strength. I don't see damage. I see courage. And when you smile, really smile, the way you did when Martha cheered for you today, the entire world gets brighter. He leaned his forehead against hers. I don't want someone perfect, Ava. I want someone real. And you are the most real, most remarkable person I have ever known. And then, in a garden full of resilient roses and fading sunlight, Sebastian kissed her. It was different from their first kiss, deeper, more certain, full of promise instead of just possibility. Ava felt 7 years of isolation and pain begin to heal in the warmth of being truly, deeply seen. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, Ava rested her head on Sebastian's shoulder. We're going to restore this garden, she said. My mother's garden. We'll bring it back to life. We'll restore everything, Sebastian promised. The garden, the manor, your life, all of it. And sitting there in the twilight, surrounded by roses that had refused to die despite years of neglect, Ava believed him. Because darkness had tried to destroy her and failed. Because love had found her in the ruins. Because justice, finally, had been served. And because tomorrow, for the first time in 7 years, Ava would wake up free. 3 months later. The autumn sun cast golden light across the grounds of Ashford Manor, illuminating a scene that would have been unimaginable just months before. The East Garden, her mother's garden, was alive again. Lady Ava Ashford knelt in the rich soil, her hands dirty from planting the last of the autumn roses. Around her, the garden bloomed in shades of cream and crimson, yellow and pink. The fountain had been repaired and now sang with clear water. Stone benches had been cleaned and repositioned. Paths had been cleared and lined with lavender. But it wasn't just the garden that had been restored. Ava herself barely resembled the hollow-eyed servant girl who'd scrubbed floors just months ago. Her hair, properly cared for now, shone golden in the sunlight. Her face had filled out, the sharp angles of starvation replaced by healthy color. But the greatest change was in her eyes, no longer haunted and afraid, but clear and purposeful. "My lady," Martha called from the garden path, "you have visitors." Ava looked up to see a group of young women approaching, led by Sebastian. They were girls she recognized, daughters of the other families Catherine and Caldwell had destroyed. Girls who, like Ava, had survived abuse and manipulation. Lady Ava, said the youngest, a girl of perhaps 15 with shy eyes. Lord Thorne said, "You were the one who helped free us, who exposed what they did to our families." Ava stood, brushing soil from her dress. "We all helped free each other. Your testimonies at the trial were what sealed Catherine's fate." The trial had been the sensation of London for weeks. Catherine Caldwell, no longer entitled to use the name Ashford after the annulment, had been convicted on 17 counts of murder, conspiracy, fraud, and abuse. The evidence had been overwhelming: Edmund's letter, Sebastian's investigation, Caldwell's confession, and most damning of all, the testimonies of survivors. 4 families were destroyed, 6 people were murdered, countless lives shattered. The judge had shown no mercy. Catherine had been sentenced to hang, the execution scheduled for the following month. Caldwell had received life imprisonment for his role in the conspiracy. When the verdict was read, Catherine had screamed that they were all lying, that she was the victim, that this was a conspiracy against her. But her words fell on deaf ears. The evidence was irrefutable. The pattern was clear. Justice, finally, had been served. "What will you do now?" Ava asked the girls gently. The oldest, a young woman of 20 with sad eyes, stepped forward. "That's why we came. Lord Thorne told us about your foundation, the one you're starting to help survivors of abuse." Ava smiled. It was true. Her 21st birthday had come 2 weeks ago, and with it, full control of her inheritance. The fortune Catherine had tried to steal was now entirely Ava's, and she'd wasted no time putting it to use. The Helena Ashford Foundation for Vulnerable Women and Children had been established with a substantial endowment. Its mission: to provide safe housing, education, legal assistance, and emotional support to anyone suffering under abusive guardianship or domestic tyranny. "We were hoping," the girl continued, "that maybe we could help. We know what it's like to feel powerless. We could reach others who are suffering, help them find the courage to speak up." Ava felt tears prick her eyes. This was what her mother would have wanted. Not revenge, but restoration. Not punishment alone, but purpose, born from pain. "I would be honored to have you join us," Ava said warmly. Sebastian stepped forward, his eyes soft with admiration as he watched Ava with the girls. Over the past 3 months, their relationship had deepened from rescue and crisis into something real and solid. He'd courted her properly. Afternoon walks, chaperoned visits, long conversations about books and justice and the kind of world they wanted to build together. He'd been patient with her nightmares, gentle with her fears, steady when the trauma of 7 years occasionally overwhelmed her healing. And slowly, carefully, Ava had learned to trust again, to hope again, to love. "Ladies," Sebastian said with a slight bow, "if you follow Martha, she'll show you to the drawing room where Mrs. Pemberton is coordinating the Foundation's activities. I believe she has work assignments for willing volunteers." As the girls departed, chattering with newfound excitement, Sebastian turned to Ava with a smile. "You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm just doing what my mother would have done." "You're doing I want to do it. There's a difference." He offered his arm. "Walk with me?" They strolled through the restored garden, past beds of roses and clusters of lavender. Ava paused at a particular rose bush, white blooms tinged with pink. "My mother planted this one the day before she died," Ava said softly. "My father told me she said it was for me, that it would bloom every year on my birthday, a reminder that she was still with me day." "Catherine tried to kill it," Sebastian observed, noting the scarring on the older stems. "She tried, but it survived." Ava touched a bloom gently. "Just like I did." Sebastian was quiet for a moment, then said, "There's something I need to tell you. About Catherine." Ava's stomach tightened. "What about her?" "She's requested to see you. Before the execution." The request shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. Why would she want to see me? I don't know. The prison chaplain said she's been different, quieter. He thinks she may want to confess, or apologize, or... Sebastian stopped, his expression uncertain. "You don't have to go. You owe her nothing." Ava considered this. Part of her never wanted to see Catherine's face again. But another part, the part that had survived 7 years of cruelty and chosen kindness anyway, wondered if there might be some value in closure. "I'll think about it," she said finally. They continued walking until they reached the old stone bench where Sebastian had first told her he wanted to court her. He guided her to sit, then rather than sitting beside her, he knelt on one knee in front of her. Ava's breath caught. "Ava!" Sebastian began, his voice steady but emotional. "3 months ago, I came to Ashford Manor to expose corruption. I thought I was here to solve a case, to bring justice, to right a wrong." He took her hand. "But what I found was so much more than that. I found a woman of extraordinary courage, a survivor who chose compassion over bitterness, a soul so beautiful that every day with you makes me want to be a better man." Tears were already streaming down Ava's face. "I know it's soon," Sebastian continued. "I know you're still healing, still reclaiming your life. But Ava, I don't want to spend another day without knowing that you'll be mine and I'll be yours. Not as a rescue, not as a strategy, but as partners, as equals, as two people who choose each other, freely and completely." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, elegant and understated. "Lady Ava Ashford, will you marry me?" Ava looked at the man kneeling before her, this person who'd seen her at her lowest and never once treated her as broken, who'd fought beside her instead of just for her, who'd given her space to heal, while making it clear he'd wait as long as it took. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Sebastian, 1,000 times. Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. Around them, the garden seemed to celebrate, roses swaying in the breeze, birds singing, sunlight warm and golden. When they finally parted, both laughing and crying, Ava heard applause. She turned to see Alexander standing on the garden path, his arms still in a sling, but his face radiant with joy. Behind him stood Martha, Thomas, Mrs. Kemper, and what looked like the entire household staff. "About time," Martha called out, not bothering to hide her tears. Alexander approached, embracing both of them. "Welcome to the family, Sebastian. Officially." He looked at Ava, his eyes shining. "Your father would be overjoyed. And your mother." He gestured to the white and pink roses. "I think she's been watching over this moment." That evening, the manor buzzed with celebration. A feast was prepared, not for aristocratic guests, but for the servants who'd protected Ava in secret, for the allies who'd stood with them, for the survivors who'd testified at the trial. Lord Hastings arrived from London with news. "The king himself has taken notice of the foundation. He's offering royal patronage and additional funding. Apparently, your work has inspired reform in guardianship laws." "That's wonderful," Ava said, genuinely pleased. "There's more." Hastings smiled. 3 more families have come forward with evidence of similar schemes. Catherine and Caldwell's network was larger than we thought. But because of your courage in speaking up, we're dismantling the entire operation." Ava felt the weight of that, how her choice to fight back had rippled outward, freeing others who'd been trapped in silence. Later, as the celebration continued, Ava slipped away to the library, the room where Alexander had first witnessed Catherine's cruelty. She stood before the portrait of her parents, really looking at them. Her father, strong and kind. Her mother, gentle and fierce. "I did it," she whispered to them. "I survived her, and I'm going to make sure others survive too. That your deaths weren't for nothing. They see you, you know." She turned to find Alexander in the doorway. "I like to think they do," Ava said. He moved to stand beside her, looking up at his brother's painted face. "I owe you an apology, Ava. A real one. Not just for the past 3 months, but for every day before that when I could have done more. I should have seen more." "Uncle—" "No, let me finish." His voice was thick with emotion. "I told myself I was being strategic, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. But the truth is, I was also a coward. I was afraid of confronting Catherine, afraid of admitting I'd brought a monster into our home, afraid of the scandal and the social consequences. He turned to her. I prioritized my reputation and the estate's stability over your safety, and that was unforgivable. Ava took his hand. You were manipulated by someone who'd spent years perfecting her craft. She fooled my father, a man who loved my mother deeply. She fooled the ton, the magistrates, everyone. You're not a coward for falling for her lies. You're human. You're too kind to me. I'm exactly as kind as I choose to be. Ava smiled. And I choose to forgive you, Uncle. Fully and completely. Because I know you love me. And because you've spent the past 3 months proving it every single day. Alexander pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of his healing shoulder. I'm so proud of you, Ava. So very proud. They stood there in the library, two people who'd both been wounded by Catherine's schemes, both healing, both choosing forgiveness and forward motion over bitterness and stagnation. 2 weeks later. Ava stood outside Newgate Prison, her hand clasped firmly in Sebastian's. The gray stone walls loomed oppressive and cold, a stark contrast to the gardens of Ashford Manor. You don't have to do this, Sebastian reminded her for the 3rd time. I know, but I need to. The prison chaplain led them through dark corridors that smelled of despair and human suffering. Finally, they reached a small cell, where Catherine sat on a narrow cot, wearing a plain gray dress, her once luxurious hair hanging limp and unwashed. When Catherine looked up and saw Ava, something flickered across her face. Not quite remorse, but something close to recognition. You came, Catherine said, her voice hoarse. You asked to see me. Catherine stood slowly. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The veneer of aristocratic beauty had cracked, revealing the hollow shell beneath. They're going to hang me in 3 days, Catherine said, matter-of-factly. I know. Does that make you happy? To see me brought low? Ava considered the question honestly. No. It doesn't make me happy. But it makes me feel safe, knowing you can't hurt anyone else. Catherine laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I suppose I should have killed you when I had the chance. Would have been simpler. Why didn't you? Ava asked. You killed my parents. Why keep me alive just to torture me? For a long moment, Catherine was silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. Quieter, almost reflective. Because killing you would have been quick, over in a moment. But breaking you, that was art. That was power. She looked directly at Ava. Every time you flinched when I entered a room, every time you apologized for existing, every time I saw that light in your eyes dim a little more, that was a victory. Better than death. More complete. Except I didn't break, Ava said softly. Catherine's expression twisted. No, you didn't. And I still don't understand why. Everyone else did. The other children, the other families, they all broke eventually. But you, she shook her head. You should have broken. I had something you didn't understand, Ava said. People who loved me. My parents may have been dead, but their love lived on. In Martha's kindness, in Thomas's protection, in Uncle Alexander's guilt-driven vigilance, even in the servants who couldn't help me openly, but tried to make my burdens lighter. She stepped closer. You were alone, Catherine. Even with all your schemes and allies, you were fundamentally alone. But I never was. Something in Catherine's face crumbled. I didn't ask you here to be preached at? Then why did you ask me here? Catherine turned away, staring at the wall. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. To see if I felt anything. Remorse, guilt, regret. The chaplain keeps talking about redemption and forgiveness and making peace with God. She laughed hollowly. But when I look at you, all I feel is angry. Angry that you survived. Angry that you're beautiful and engaged and happy while I'm here waiting to die. Then you're wasting your last days, Ava said, not unkindly. You could choose differently. You could acknowledge what you did, seek genuine forgiveness, try to make whatever peace is possible before I hang? Catherine turned back, her eyes hard. Why should I? So you can feel better? So you can leave here thinking you fixed me, redeemed your abuser, proved that love conquers all. No, Ava said calmly. So you can die with a clean conscience instead of carrying all that hate and bitterness into whatever comes next. Catherine stared at her for a long moment. You really believe that, don't you? That there's something after this? That it matters how we behave, what choices we make? I have to believe it. Otherwise, what was the point of surviving you? What's the point of choosing kindness over cruelty if it's all just nothing in the end? For just a second, something flickered in Catherine's eyes. A glimpse of the woman she might have been if she'd chosen differently. Loved instead of manipulated, built instead of destroyed. Then it was gone. You should go, Catherine said flatly. You came for closure. Here it is. I'm not sorry. I don't regret what I did. And, if I had it to do over, the only thing I'd change is being more thorough. Does that give you what you need? Ava looked at this woman who'd haunted her nightmares for 7 years and felt pity. Profound, aching pity for someone so consumed by bitterness that she couldn't even grasp at redemption when it was offered. Goodbye, Catherine, Ava said gently. I forgive you. Not because you've earned it or asked for it, but because I refuse to carry your poison in my heart anymore. You took 7 years of my life. You don't get the rest of it. She turned to leave, Sebastian's arm coming around her shoulders. But Catherine's voice stopped her. Wait. Ava turned back. Catherine's mask had finally, completely shattered. Tears streamed down her face, the first real tears Ava had ever seen from her. How? Catherine whispered. How do you just let it go? How do you forgive what I did? I forgive you because holding on to hate would make me like you, Ava said simply. And I choose to be like my mother instead. She left Catherine there, weeping in her cell, and didn't look back. Outside the prison, in the pale autumn sunlight, Sebastian held her close. Are you all right? I am, Ava said, surprised to find it was true. I really am. She can't hurt me anymore, not ever again. They rode back to Ashford Manor in comfortable silence, Ava's head resting on Sebastian's shoulder. The nightmare was truly, finally over. 6 months later. Chaktania. Stribring. The gardens of Ashford Manor had never been more beautiful. Spring had arrived with an explosion of color. Tulips and daffodils, cherry blossoms and wisteria. And in the center of the East Garden, surrounded by her mother's roses, Lady Ava Ashford prepared to marry Lord Sebastian Thorne. Guests filled the garden, not just aristocracy, but servants, villagers, the girls from the foundation, families they'd helped, allies who'd stood with them. A true community gathered to celebrate not just a wedding, but a triumph of love over cruelty, hope over despair. Ava stood in her childhood bedroom, fully restored now, bright and beautiful, while Martha helped her into her wedding gown. It was ivory silk with delicate lace, elegant but not ostentatious. In her hair, she wore her mother's sapphire tiara. Around her neck, her mother's pearls. You look just like Lady Helena, Martha said, tears streaming freely. She would be so proud. I hope so, Ava whispered. Alexander appeared in the doorway, resplendent in formal attire, his shoulder fully healed now. It's time, he said gently. As Ava took his arm, he pressed something into her hand. A folded letter. What's this? Something I found in your father's study. He wrote it for you. to be given on your wedding day. Alexander's voice was thick with emotion. I think he knew, somehow, that this day would come. That you would survive and find love and build the life you deserved. Ava unfolded the letter with trembling hands. My dearest Ava, if you're reading this, then you're about to marry, and I am not there to walk you down the aisle. I'm sorry for that. Sorry I won't see the beautiful woman you've become. Sorry I won't get to meet the person you've chosen to love. But I want you to know, wherever I am, I'm watching. I'm proud. And I'm cheering louder than anyone. Your mother and I loved each other completely. The kind of love that makes life an adventure instead of an obligation. I hope you found that same kind of love. The kind that challenges you and comforts you. That makes you better while accepting you exactly as you are. Remember, you are worthy of love. Not because of your title or your fortune or your beauty, but because you are you, kind, brave, compassionate, strong. Walk into your marriage knowing you are loved. By your husband, yes, but also by me and your mother, across whatever veil separates us. Our love for you is eternal. Be happy, my darling girl. Build a life full of joy and purpose. And when you have children of your own, tell them about their grandmother who loved roses and their grandfather who loved her. We're always with you. Forever, your devoted father, Edmund. Ava was openly weeping now, but they were good tears, healing tears. Thank you, she whispered to Alexander. Ready? He asked. Ready. Music began to play, a string quartet performing a piece her mother had loved. Ava stepped out into the garden and the assembled guests rose, but she barely saw them. Her eyes were fixed on Sebastian, standing beneath an arch of roses, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. As Alexander walked her down the petal-strewn aisle, Ava felt the presence of her parents, not as ghosts or memories, but as something real and eternal. Love that transcended death. She reached Sebastian, and Alexander placed her hand in his. Take care of her, Alexander said, his voice breaking slightly. Always, Sebastian promised. The ceremony was beautiful and simple. They spoke vows they'd written themselves, promises of partnership, respect, love, and the commitment to build something beautiful from the ashes of pain. When Sebastian slipped the wedding band onto her finger, Ava thought of the journey that had brought her here. 7 years of darkness, months of fighting back, and now a future full of light. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared. Sebastian kissed her deeply, and the garden erupted in applause and cheers. As they walked back down the aisle as Lord and Lady Thorne, Ava caught Martha's eye and smiled. The old housekeeper was sobbing with joy, Thomas beside her grinning broadly. The celebration that followed was joyous and genuine. They danced in the garden as the sun set, toasted with champagne and laughter, shared stories and hope. At one point, Ava found herself standing beside the white and pink rose bush, her mother's last planting. It was covered in blooms, more than it had ever produced before. It knows you're happy, Sebastian said, appearing at her side. Do you believe that? That plants can feel joy? I believe that love has power we don't fully understand. And this garden? He gestured to the restored beauty surrounding them. This garden is full of love. Your mother's, your father's, yours. Of course it blooms. As night fell and stars emerged, lanterns were lit throughout the garden, creating a fairy tale glow. Ava and Sebastian shared their first dance as husband and wife, swaying gently to music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Are you happy? Sebastian whispered. Incredibly, Ava replied. I didn't think I could be this happy. After everything Catherine did, after all those years, I thought maybe I'd forgotten how. You didn't forget. You just needed the right person to remind you. He kissed her forehead. And I plan to spend the rest of our lives, making sure you never forget again. Later, as the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, Ava stood with Alexander watching the last stars emerge. "The foundation is thriving," Alexander said. "The manor is restored. Catherine is gone, and you're married to a good man who loves you." He looked at her with deep affection. "You've built something beautiful from terrible circumstances, Ava. Your parents would be so proud, and so am I. I couldn't have done any of it without you, Uncle." "Yes, you could have. But I'm grateful I got to help." He paused. "I have some news. I've been offered a position at the King's Court, advising on legal reforms for guardianship and protection of orphans. Partly because of the Foundation's work, partly because of what we exposed with Catherine. That's wonderful. It means I'll be in London more often, which means the manor will be yours and Sebastian's to manage." He smiled. "As it should be. This has always been your home, Ava. Now it's time for you to truly make it yours." Ava looked at Ashford Manor, the place that had been both her paradise and her prison. Under Catherine's rule, it had been dark and oppressive, but now full of light and laughter and hope, it was home again. "We'll make it a place of healing," she said, "for ourselves and for others. I know you will." 1 year later. Lady Ava Thorne stood in the nursery of Ashford Manor, gently rocking her newborn daughter. The baby had her father's green eyes and her mother's golden hair, a perfect blend of both. "She's beautiful," Sebastian said softly from the doorway. "She is." Ava smiled down at the sleeping infant. "Helena Rose Thorne. For both our mothers." Sebastian moved to embrace them both, his family. "Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times. You're slacking," Ava teased. Through the nursery window, she could see the gardens in full summer bloom. The Foundation had expanded. They now had 3 houses across England providing refuge and support. Dozens of women and children had been helped. Laws had been reformed. Catherine and Caldwell's entire network had been dismantled. But more than any of that, Ava had rebuilt her life. Not by pretending the past hadn't happened, but by choosing what to do with it. She'd taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. Her scars turned into strength, her suffering into service. "What are you thinking?" Sebastian asked, reading her distant expression. "That I'm happy," Ava said simply. "After everything, despite everything, I'm genuinely, completely happy." "And Catherine didn't take that from me. She tried, but she failed." "She failed spectacularly," Sebastian agreed. He kissed the top of baby Helena's head. "Because look what you built. This family, this foundation, this life. You won, Ava. In every way that matters, you won." That night, after Helena was asleep and the house was quiet, Ava walked through the gardens one final time. She paused at her mother's rosebush, now magnificent and thriving. "Thank you," she whispered to the night, to her parents, to whatever force had given her the strength to survive. "Thank you for not letting me break. Thank you to the people who protected me. Thank you for bringing Sebastian into my life. Thank you for all of it." A breeze rustled the rose petals, gentle and warm, and Ava chose to believe it was her mother's touch, her father's blessing. She turned back toward the manor, where light glowed in the windows and her husband waited with their daughter, where servants she loved worked in respect, not fear, where every room held memories being rewritten from pain to joy. Ashford Manor stood proud and beautiful under the stars, no longer a prison, but a home. And Lady Ava Thorne, survivor, wife, mother, philanthropist, warrior, walked toward it with her head held high, her heart full of peace, and her future bright, with infinite possibility. The darkness was behind her. The light was ahead. And she had finally, completely, come home. Ava's journey shows us that our past doesn't have to define our future, that we can transform pain into purpose and choose healing over bitterness. Have you ever turned a difficult experience into something meaningful? Or is there a wound you're still carrying that might become your greatest strength? Share your story below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to begin their own healing journey. Of the end. Where there's love, there is life. Where there is courage, there is hope. And where roses bloom again, there is always the promise of new beginnings.
Thank you for joining Ava's journey from darkness to light, from victim to victor, from broken to beautifully whole. May her story remind you that no matter how long the night, dawn always comes for those brave enough to keep fighting. If this story touched your heart, don't leave just yet. Here on Olivia's Tales, every story holds a lesson, a tear, or a little bit of hope. Subscribe now and join our growing family of dreamers and believers, because the next story might just be the one that changes how you see life. Turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next chapter. And until then, remember, every heart has a story, and here we tell them all.